Okay, let's unpack this. We've got quite a stack of sources here,
Nice.
all diving into one, well, really iconic American tradition, prom.
Definitely iconic. Maybe sometimes bewildering, too.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking at articles, historical accounts, notes, exploring everything from like its origins, which are kind of surprising, to the really eye-watering cost today.
Oh, yeah. The cost is something else.
So our mission here in this deep dive, this sort of Proms Explained, is to pull out the key insights from all this stuff.
And figure out what it really means.
Yeah,
Why it's changed so much.
because it's definitely more than just a fancy dance.
Way more. It's fascinating, actually, looking at these sources, how the whole idea started somewhere completely different.
Yeah, you mentioned surprising origins, so it wasn't a high school thing at first.
No, not at all, according to these accounts. It seems to trace back to 19th century formal dances, aristocratic ones.
Aristocratic.
Yeah, and then it sort of evolved from college promenades. I think
Hmm.
places like Harvard, Smith College.
Huh. So college kids imitating high society.
Pretty much. Like juniors and seniors trying to have their own version of those fancy coming out balls.
Okay, so that transition to high school is really important then. What did the sources say about the impact of that move?
Oh, well, that's where this idea of democratization seems to pop up a lot in the readings.
Democratization, how so?
It became like a version of the debutante ball, but, supposedly more accessible. Yeah. Not just for the super wealthy.
Right.
It really started catching on in high schools before World War II and then just exploded afterwards.
And I saw something in the notes about venues changing around then too, moving out of school gyms.
Exactly. Into fancier places like hotels, big ballrooms.
Which makes sense if it's becoming this bigger rite of passage.
Yeah, the sources really lean into that, calling it a symbolic step, from being a kid to being more of an adult.
Almost like the climax of high school for some people, it said.
Yeah.
A big shared ritual.
Mm-hmm. Very student-centered in theory, and maybe that drive, that need to mark the occasion so heavily, present themselves as adults. Maybe that's partly why it's just ballooned into such a huge business.
Okay, so college to high school, democratization, then the money aspect. The sources mentioned, wait, is it really over a $4 billion industry in the U.S. now?
Annually, yeah. That number is staggering when you think about it.
How does it even get that expensive for one night?
Well, it just adds up, doesn't it? The sources break it down. Average spending is like $600 to over $1,000 per teen.
Wow. What's that covering?
The outfits, obviously, tuxes, dresses, then tickets, fancy transport like limos sometimes, professional photos, hair, makeup.
Okay, yeah.
And then you've got the after parties, which can be pretty elaborate themselves.
And what about these promposals? That seems like a whole new level.
Oh, absolutely. That's another layer of, well, extravagance the sources point to. These big, public, sometimes really complicated ways of asking someone.
Right.
It's become its own performance. Some kids apparently spend over $300 just on the proposal part.
Just to ask someone. That's incredible. It really shows how much cultural weight is on every single bit of this event.
Definitely. And with all those expectations, the tradition, the cost, the social pressure, it naturally leads to issues, right? Conflict.
Especially since it's usually school-sponsored, so there are rules about dress codes, who can come, behavior.
Yes, and that brings up a really a crucial point about inclusion that the sources detail pretty heavily.
Ah, yeah. The exclusion aspect.
Despite that whole democratizing idea, prom has this really difficult history, particularly with race.
I saw that in the readings. In the Jim Crow South, segregated proms.
For decades.
Yeah, long after schools were supposedly desegregated by law. It's pretty shocking.
Some schools had separate proms for black and white students well into the 60s, even 70s.
And there was that one school in Georgia, its first integrated prom wasn't until 2013.
2013, that's not that long ago.
Not at all. And it wasn't just race. The sources also talk about legal fights and, social pushback over same-sex couples attending, or students wanting to wear clothes that didn't fit traditional gender roles.
Exactly. It shows that this Rite of Passage hasn't always felt like a passage everyone was allowed to take.
So, a lot of tension there. Have things changed?
Well, the sources do note that in recent years there's been more effort from schools to be inclusive. Or sometimes students just organize their own alternative events if the official one doesn't feel welcoming.
Right. Creating their own spaces.
Yeah.
Okay, so pulling this all together, our deep dive into Proms Explained, it shows this journey, doesn't it?
Totally. From a college thing imitating the rich,
To a high school attempt at being this democratic milestone.
which then kind of morphed into this multi-billion-dollar behemoth.
Yeah, with these huge rituals like promposals, but also wrestling with this really difficult history of exclusion race, gender identity.
It really does seem to mirror the bigger shifts in American society.
Yeah, no.
Class issues, segregation, changing ideas about gender, and just the pure economics of growing up.
It's definitely steeped in history. Reflects aspirations, but also those struggles for inclusion.
Mhm.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty important question, I think.
Yeah.
Well, given everything we've seen, the history, the exclusion, and especially now the cost, I mean, when it can easily top $1,000,
Right.
does prom today still really work as that democratized rite of passage for everyone?
Huh.
Or has the focus on, the sheer extravagance shifted what it means entirely?
Has the meaning moved away from that original, maybe more inclusive idea?
Exactly. Something for you to think about.
Yeah.